What is up? What is up? What is up? Welcome to the Mitch Davis Show. It is time of recording December 1st, Tuesday night, or Thursday night, sorry. A little tired watching a little college basketball. Got a big game on, two big games this weekend. One on Saturday, Memphis Ole Miss, and also on Sunday, got Northwest played in their JUCO college football playoff game. So, with that being said, I want to welcome my good buddy and my friend, from InsideTheRebels.com, Jared Redding, to the Mitch Davis Show. Jared, what up? How you doing, brother?
Man, I'm doing just fine. Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, right off the bat, two really big games. Especially if you're kind of in this local sphere that that Oxford's part of and Memphis is part of, and then you go cover a program that's literally right smack in the middle of both of them with a football team that's trying to go to a national championship. So it's going to be fun to go to witness firsthand and really just kind of take a little bit of a breather from college football. I'm not saying, that's something that I enjoy doing very often, taking a breather from that, but just to kind of mix it up a little bit and kind of expand your portfolio.
Jared, I'm not going to mention it when I can talk about it, but I know you're exhausted from the last couple of weeks with a certain coach in Oxford that we won't talk about. We're going to stay on the positive stuff. Ole Miss takes on Memphis. They travel to the FedEx Forum. What do you expect to see out of this from Ole Miss? And give me your thoughts from their NBA Invitational down there in Orlando.
Yeah, I mean that invitational really showed, what I guess Ole Miss is capable of with the depth that they currently have and what they're able to do without Deshaun Ruffin. It was kind of the thing when you look at last year and them going 13-19 that there was really nowhere to go but up for this Ole Miss team. Of course, when you bring in a recruiting class that's very guard heavy, and then you bring in a transfer class that's very forward heavy, four grad transfers, guys who've had so many points, rebounds, and assists, blocks, and steals to their name. How that would mix in with the players that didn't transfer that stayed on this roster this year, and I think this team has the capability to be good, and they showed that a lot early on. On paper, it wasn't the best schedule. Not always. Some certain wins have looked a lot bigger. The FAU win that Ole Miss had looks a lot bigger now because their only loss is against Ole Miss. They beat Florida as well. The Alcorn State upset Wichita State earlier in the year. And then when you got down to Orlando, Stanford has a chance to be really good. Ole Miss took care of them. Siena as well. Everyone in that field, including Memphis. There's a lot of that entire bubble in general is filled with a bunch of teams who, if things go right and go their way, you could possibly see their name called in March. But obviously, they'll have to take care of business on their own end to do so. But personnel wise, being able to take care of it. But with Ruffin, out again because he was recovering from an ACL injury. He had a bone bruise in his knee, which had sidelined him, which he suffered in the preseason game, which has sidelined him for the first 7 games that actually count. But Amari Abrams did a really good job stepping up. He scored 26 points in that game against Stanford down in Orlando. Just very mature for somebody his age. TJ Caldwell, when he's not rolling his ankle, has looked solid, is a good on-ball defender, kind of on both ends of the floor. And then the transfer class, Miles Burns has been, I think, the biggest, I won't say biggest surprise, but he's been, the guy who people question, was he going to make the jump from the NAIA ranks, regardless of winning a national championship there, to the SEC? And he just has that will to win and that it factor. I think that a lot of transfers don't really have in their first year if they're not really a blue chip transfer. But he's looks really solid. He, Javius McKinnis. I mean, and then Matthew Morrell, who's getting a little bit off and on this year, but when he's on, he's absolutely on. It's going to be interesting to see what he does when he returns to his hometown in Memphis this Saturday. So Ole Miss is 6-1, their best start since 2013-14 season. And but they'll have quite the test, their first true road test going against Memphis this Saturday.
I want to talk about the rivalry next, but I want to ask you, what are you hearing Kermit talk about this Memphis team? What are you hearing out of him? And obviously, Memphis has got Diedrich and DeAndre Williams, Alo, Malcolm Dandridge, all of these guys that have contributed a lot that looked good against North Alabama last night. But what are you hearing from Kermit Davis's side of things on how Ole Miss plans to combat this Memphis explosiveness?
Now, if we would have recorded this tomorrow, at the time of recording, I would have a better answer for you because we're going to meet with Kermit tomorrow at 2 to talk about it. But yeah, I mean, it's something that I've been looking at the past couple of days with Ole Miss and Memphis. Especially, what they have in their roster, team wise, statistically, they're very similar to Ole Miss in a lot of ways. They play some solid defense. And they're both averaging just right at 70 points a game. All that. I think Kendrick Davis, is the guy for Ole Miss that you really need to circle. He's score, I think, right at 20 points a game. And Alex Lomax it is Lomax, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Alex Lomax,
Alex Lomax just defensively, he's got 20 steals on the year, which is pretty impressive for the start of the year. But their losses have been really close losses, and against some really really good teams, and that's what you're going to kind of go up against with Memphis is they're so athletic year in and year out. Penny and Steph bring in some guys. These guys who Ole Miss would go after in a heartbeat. That's why they went after Matthew Morrell a few years ago, right in Memphis's backyard. And Memphis has got some players over the years that are kind of in Ole Miss's kind of recruiting grounds a little bit too, kind of in that I-55 corridor, 22, if you will. A lot of good basketball players out there. But I think with Ole Miss, I think they have a chance to be victorious, but at the same time, they have to not do what they did last week and go on just long droughts. They have to make when they get around the goal. Ole Miss has really revamped their front court a little bit. Offensively, it's kind of been off and on a little bit. They've gotten looks down low, but they've just struggled to finish and really struggled to handle the ball down low a little bit. But defensively, I mean, I think this is a team that's about as advertised when you look at their front court and all that. So I think Ole Miss needs to finish when they get around the goal and really just get to the free throw line and you really be physical when they get down to that part of the floor.
Jared, let's talk about this rivalry. Obviously, everybody knows the history of Ole Miss and Memphis. When you talk about those two, it's a hate. It's a pretty, as much as Ole Miss fans don't want to give the credit to Memphis, saying they're not a rival, whatever. The two fan bases don't really like each other. You've got two very economical differences. You've got different, demographics in both areas. Talk about this rivalry. Obviously, you're coming from the Ole Miss side. I'm coming from the Memphis side of things. Talk about this rivalry and how healthy it is for this region to have Ole Miss and Memphis playing again.
Yeah, I think rivalry takes on a lot of different faces and a lot of different approaches to it. Some rivalries are out of mutual respect for the other program, what they've done, and just simply wanting to beat them, plain and simple. Sometimes it's just extremely toxic and venomous because of whatever happened before and whatever will happen, or just a situational type things. Or rivalries when it comes to just trying to just own your backyard, if you will. But in rivalry, or it could be a rivalry because the series between team A and team B may be so close. So I think Memphis, with Ole Miss Memphis, I think it checks 2 out of those 4 categories because they recruit the same kids really across all sports, regardless of conference or just the level of competition and all that. There are good players who have grown up kind of in the Memphis area. Oxford, depending on who you ask, is kind of technically part of the Ole Miss Memphis metro corridor, metro area, depending on who you ask, if you will. My parents, live, on the outskirts west of Oxford, and they get Memphis news instead of, in Tupelo, which is the nearest TV station, if you will. And I think with some of that is, and I think the other part of it is just because, when you look at your conference and all that, you got the SEC that you and I are both very familiar with, and you have another school who's within the same SEC region, if you will, that when they play in these games, regardless of what SEC team may be, is their Super Bowl. And Ole Miss just so happens to be an hour road down I-55 or 22, depending on which way you go down. But I think with certain sports, I think it means something too, because they go after the same kids, or it could be like football where where if Ole Miss has a down year and Memphis has have a good year or even an average year, or even if Ole Miss is having a good year and Memphis is having a subpar year, Memphis is going to get after Ole Miss because that's the biggest game on their schedule every year. There's a lot of familiarity with those, and I think with basketball, it's kind of similar thing. I wrote about this earlier today. While Ole Miss is not exactly, from a basketball standpoint, not really known as a basketball powerhouse, we're really even a consistently winning basketball program. Ole Miss is just barely above 500 all time in the program's history. Memphis, I think, owns the edge in the series. Total, I think, 28-15, excuse me. But Ole Miss has won 4 of the last 5. In this one, the last Memphis win coming in 2019, if I'm not mistaken. But I think Ole Miss has really recruited that area of Memphis really well over the past couple of years. And not to say Memphis hasn't. Shoot, when you have Penny Hardaway in your backyard, you're going to get some really good kids from that area. But it's one of those that I'm glad that it's there, and I'm glad it's there in most sports. Even with baseball, where Memphis is not exactly known for its baseball, but Ole Miss is. It's good to kind of see that because there's so much familiarity between the two fan bases, and it's just kind of a backyard brawl, if you will.
You and I have it's kind of funny. You and I have a group chat with a Tennessee buddy of ours, and I guarantee you, whoever wins on Saturday, one of us is going to be sending a taunting text message after the game to each other because you went to Ole Miss and I'm from Memphis. But Jared, I want to ask you. We're jumping over to the gridiron. There is a big old game in Senatobia, Mississippi on Sunday afternoon. Both you and I are going to be there, 5:00 kickoff. What do you expect to see out of this Northwest game? And talk about this matchup and what it does mean for the community at Northwest.
I think it means a lot to the community of Northwest. Northwest, for any who are unfamiliar, it's so, community colleges are naturally family oriented because it's so, regionally centric, no matter which JUCO you are, especially in Mississippi and all that. But Northwest, is very much, DeSoto County, Tates County, I-55 as south as Water Valley, if you will, and all that. But like the alumni are so loyal to Northwest, whether they played athletics or just academically. Things like this means a lot to them. And from a football perspective, I think Northwest, and they're already, legitimate. They've already kind of slowly but surely kind of taken that, top dog throne from EMCC over the past couple of years, as far as just, getting the players in the state who are, not group of 5, power 5 kids, or even some transfers from there, and really just, modeling a consistently winning program, just with just a lot of hard work and a lot of blood, sweat, and tears and all that. But from a program perspective, I think a lot of people who follow Northwest football are big, huge fans of football, are kind of looking for legitimacy in the fact of, they're gunning for their 5th national championship in program history. The last 2, you could argue, it kind of come with some asterisks a little bit with the last 2. The ones without technically asterisks being in 1992, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
So in 2015, yes, they were, outright named national champions, but we tend to forget that was the year that EMCC beat them by 30 points in the regular season, but were disqualified from the playoff because of a brawl at the end of the year, which was well documented if you watched Last Chance U.
I actually just watched that, by the way. I just rewatched that preparing for the Northwest game because I love JUCO football.
It's great.
Rewatched that, and I'm on season 2, and I'm like, I forgot about this, and I didn't realize how bad it got between Mississippi. And obviously, the Delta started it. Everybody knows the story there. But go ahead and keep talking. I had to throw that.
Oh yeah, no. Look. You can talk about Last Chance U. I could do it for days. Honestly, I love Last Chance U. It gives a really great illustration of the grind of JUCO. It didn't matter that the documentary was shot 6-5 years ago, or 6-7 years ago, excuse me. But it just shows the gritty nature of junior college football. That these are the kids that no one wants, or kids that are outcasts, really trying to buy in and trying to make something for themselves. And looking no further with Northwest, with a lot of hungry kids. But they were national champions in 2020 as well. But we tend to forget. Let's be real, 2020, that was, COVID wrecked a lot of people's lives and all that, but And while some sports it didn't quite affect and all that, it destroyed Mississippi. It destroyed junior college football in general. That was the year that the NJCAA made the decision to move their season to the spring, and the Mississippi League revolted and said, heck no, we're gonna be in the fall and we're just gonna compete, with ourselves. Forget all y'all, because we know we have the best league and one of the best leagues in JUCO football. And it just so happened that a lot of those kids got an extra year of eligibility, but that came very conveniently time for Northwest, because they had some excellent players who were on that team 2 years ago and are on the team this year, and are big components of the team that's trying to gun for a national championship should they beat Iowa Western. But it's a great team. With Northwest has had Brent Heffley has been as advertised, transferring from Presbyterian. Jamarian Bracey has been, the power back, but he's also been complimented by a guy who had Caden Betts, who's really stepped up in the backfield. And of course, you have, EJ Mason, a lot of, good weapons there too. DT Sheffield, a guy who I think Memphis is really after, as some other group of 5 schools. Defensively, Jakevius Hibbler, Tank Pearson, Sam Brumfield, just some star power. And just the kids in the MACCC, you look at it and you go, that's a really good players. But Iowa Western, their opponent Saturday is, from arguably the best conference in junior college football, the Jayhawk Conference, which is, Kansas and Iowa schools. They're the outlier of that conference. That's a conference that has 3 of the 4 teams are in this junior college playoff, with them, Hutchinson, who's the number 1 seed, and Coffeyville, who is the 4 seed. And then Independence is in that same league too. Another team featured on Last Chance U, who was less fortunate this time around. But it's going to be interesting to see in general how Northwest responds. Because they've looked kind of vulnerable the past couple of weeks.
They
They
lost
were
that
down by
state championship to East Mississippi. Remember, they lost that at
yeah.
home. They lost at home against East Mississippi, and I think kind of the same thing is I want to see how they can respond. And I've heard a lot of things. Obviously you told me, and I'm talking to people down there, but it seems like the team is focused in on this matchup with Iowa Western. Give me your prediction for the game. Can Northwest get over the hump and get to Little Rock to play for a national championship?
I think you kind of touched on it a little bit earlier when we talk about what happened in that playoff run. Obviously losing to EMCC, which if Ole Miss was, or excuse me, if Northwest was to lose to any team in the state championship, it was going to be EMCC, because they are EMCC and they're still going to hold that title for until Northwest kind of tries to push the dagger a little bit further, if you will. But Northwest, has really the entire season they've often come out flat, putting the ball away, giving up some early touchdowns and all this sort of stuff, but just haven't really played polished early on. Really just have spurts in the game where they would just kind of go cold. But once they do get hot, they're extremely tough to stop. When Jones in the semifinal game, the MACCC semifinals, they were down 17 in the second half. They just got hit in the mouth second half and just scored 21 points on back-to-back possessions, literally within a matter of like a couple of minutes. So if you let the Rangers get hot, they're going to embarrass you. So I think with Iowa Western, the thing that they're good at is punching you in the mouth, making their opponent fall down first, and just really with a combination of speed and not really making mistakes. And I feel like if Northwest plays a mistake-free game, they take care of the football, and they get off the field on third down. I could see Northwest, winning by a touchdown, maybe 10 points, but they would need to absolutely play they would have to play more than a 50%, 75% game. They need to come out and not let Iowa Western, the Reavers, really trample on them at any point in the game, but they need to keep a solid, consistent game plan that they execute for 60 minutes.
He is Jared Redding, Ole Miss beat writer for InsideTheRebels.com. Jared, tell them where they can follow you on Twitter and find all of your amazing work. at Inside the Rebels?
Yeah, you can go to InsideTheRebels.com, or you can go to 247sports.com/college/Ole Miss for Ole Miss's team site. That is Inside the Rebels, with coverage from myself, David Johnson, Tyler Kumas. We got Ole Miss football that's I want to say wrapping up, because there's bowl game coming up, there's a transfer portal coming up, there's recruiting coming up. You can follow that there. Men's basketball is under season. The defending national champions will be underway this spring. But with all sports, we'll have it at Inside the Rebels from all of us, with comprehensive coverage of all that. You can also follow me on Twitter at Jared E. Redding and see some of my content there.